So throughout my eating disorder, I had a very unhealthy relationship with exercise. And exercise to me was more of a means just to get rid of calories, as I was eating excessively at that time. And therefore, I was exercising excessively. And I knew exactly how many calories were coming in my body. And therefore, at least I had to get that same amount of calories out of my body, which meant that I spent my mornings exercising, my midday exercising, my afternoons, and my nights exercising. I would go for runs for miles. I would go to the gym for hours, and it consumed my every thought. It consumed my entire life. I put aside social interactions. I put aside other things that typically would have brought me joy because nothing else mattered. All that mattered was that I was getting out and pounding the pavement to take care of the calories that I was taking in. And a big thing that I did at that time was really take for granted what my body was capable of. The demands I was putting on it in hindsight, now that I can see more objectively, were insane. And I demanded of it to do whatever I asked of it and to do more and more and more, because really none of it was enough. No matter how much I did, it was never enough. And I continued to put it through a regimen that really was unfair to even ask of a human body to do. And in my 20s, thankfully, I was pretty resilient. I really did not notice much of a pushback from my body until kind of my mid-20s, when it all came to a screeching halt and I experienced awful back pain. And that's when I realized what I had done. That's when it really came back to let me know that it was too much. And I realized that it wasn't just the exercise that was too much. It was what I was going through my brain that was also too much. And that's what I want to talk about today, is how disordered eating is intertwined with chronic pain. And I can attest to that. I have experienced it, and I have recognized that everything I went through with my eating disorder was completely in connection with the back pain that I experienced for years. And only until I did the work to work through some of those emotions and feelings and things that I was going through mentally at that time, only then did I experience the release and the relief of my back pain. So with my eating disorder, and I know so many people who have eating disorders or have had it, they can relate to, there's a lot of body checking going on, ruminating thoughts, stress beyond belief, constant shame for what you're doing. For me, my particular eating disorder involved excessively eating, then purging through exercise. And later on in my eating disorder, I also was throwing up to purge those calories. And there was also times of restriction. So I had a lot of different aspects of my eating disorder that were very shameful for me at the time, and a lot of secrecy around that. Really, no one knew about that. And I just covered it up with that I'm an athlete. I exercise a lot because I'm an athlete. And the truth of the matter, there was a lot more going on behind the scenes. But there's also a lot of guilt, and just, like I said, a lot of stress around that. When you're trying to hide something in your life and not be your authentic self to a lot of people, it's stressful. You feel like you're doing something that you shouldn't. So all these behaviors, what happens, and I can explain this now. At the time when I was going through, I didn't know what was going on, but now I completely understand what was happening. But all these behaviors, the stress and feelings that I was experiencing at the time, all play a role in my nervous system. So it creates a heightened state of my nervous system, which is known as that sympathetic response. So it's the state in which the nervous system goes into protective mode, and you go into a fight, flight, or freeze state. And that is healthy and normal in the short acute periods. But for anyone who goes through an eating disorder, you know that is not a short acute time in your life. That is years, and for some decades. And when you're in a state of that sympathetic response or that fight, flight, and freeze for that long of a time, things happen in your nervous system where it's maladaptive and it starts creating changes. And one of those changes is known as central sensitization. And what happens when you develop this central sensitization is that your threshold decreases. So the point at which you feel pain is going to be quicker for you than someone else who hasn't gone through what you've gone through. Another thing that happens with central sensitization is that your pain is maintained and you develop a heightened sensitivity. So things that maybe are not painful to other people become very painful to you. So an example could be that you put the sheets over your legs when you go to bed. For most people, that really would not be a painful sensation, but for someone who has chronic pain, that can be extremely painful. Even just bending over to tie your shoes, for most people, that's not painful. For someone who has chronic pain, that can be excruciating. Another part of that central sensitization is that some of the factors that contribute to that are depression, fear avoidance, so the avoidance of activities and behaviors because of fear, anxiety, stress. So again, all the things that have manifested from the eating disorder. So now with this heightened sympathetic nervous system response that you have, now it turns into physical manifestation. And that's what happened as far as me with the pain, and has happened to many people who have experienced both chronic pain and have had an eating disorder. But the physical manifestation can be in the form of pain, which I experienced, tension. I also experienced that. It can be inflammation, headaches, migraines, reproductive difficulties. So it can be difficulty getting pregnant. It can be a loss of menstrual cycle, which that was also something I experienced, my eating disorder. Sleep disturbances can be part of that. And then just overall joint pain or unexplainable pain that there's really no known cause, but you're feeling this and it's very real for you. So that physical manifestation is directly related to what's been going on in your brain for that long, because you're on a protective pathway. So your brain is protecting you, and then now it's manifesting physically, and that's how it's presenting itself. And what happens when you have that, so you've had the eating disorder, and now you have this manifestation of all the aspects of the eating disorder, there's a big loss of control and increased fear with that. And part of that can be, so with excessive exercise, I'm talking about that particularly with people, but with exercise, that is your coping mechanism for an eating disorder. So for me, that was my main means to cope with what I was going through. So now when you mix pain into everything, and that changes your ability to exercise, there's a lot of fear around that. It's very stress provoking. And for the body to say, nope, you're not going to run a bunch of miles to get rid of those calories, it's scary for someone who depended on exercise to give them some kind of comfort that now that's not an option. So you can imagine that now the cycle continues. So now you resort into more disordered behaviors and the mental aspect of that. Another part of that is that you're not even sure what to do. So sometimes when you have so much pain, you're at a loss. You experience the pain. It is impeding on your function. It is taking over your life, and you don't even know what to do to get rid of that pain. And that was a position I was in when I experienced this initially, is that I don't even know how to get rid of this. I did everything I could think of, just going through the motions of exercises. I went to practitioners. I reached out on every avenue I could do, and the pain just never went away. And so there becomes this feeling of like hopelessness, like this is how I'm going to live the rest of my life. And I remember being 25, and I literally had just come out of a practitioner's office, had gotten an x-ray of my spine, and they showed me L4, L5, and they're like, you have half the disc height of what you should have for a 25-year-old. And for me at that time, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is not good. Like I'm in my 20s, I have a whole life ahead of me. And if this is how my pain is now, what is it going to be in 10, 15, 20 years? 30 years, whatever it may be, how is my pain going to be? I felt like it'd only get worse from here on out. And so you can see how all these thoughts snowball into this just awful place that it puts you in. And I wasn't even sure what to do at that time. I felt like I was just at a loss for how I could help myself not live in pain in my mid-20s. And for me, I felt very alone. I didn't know anyone who had gone through this. And I was 25 at the time. I'm like, I'm in my 20s. This is not normal to be experiencing pain like this in your 20s. I thought it was something that only older adults experienced at that time. So it was very alarming to me. And now what happens is that that fear response now perpetuates that stress response in your brain. And now the cycle continues. So now you continue to amplify the pain and everything just gets worse and worse and worse. And that's that vicious cycle that we experience when we have an eating disorder and chronic pain, and how they mesh together, and it creates a very, very terrible situation unless you know how to break that cycle. And this is a very tough place to be in. So if you're listening to this and you're experiencing chronic pain and an eating disorder, it's hard. It is complex. They play on each other. And in some cases, like for me, I had the eating disorder first and developed chronic pain, but there are many cases where people have chronic pain and develop an eating disorder as a coping mechanism for the chronic pain. So it can go both ways. They're very reciprocal. And how they feed on each other. And that's the horrible part of this, that it becomes very complex. And that's the kind of terrible part of it. But to bring light to the subject, because it is very tough, especially if you're going through this, there is hope at the end of the tunnel. And that comes in the form of nervous system regulation. And this is what I did, and it has worked. I mean, I can say that I'm in my mid 30s, late 30s working there, but I don't have pain. I just had my second child 3 months ago. I do everything I want to do. I lift, I ski, I play sports, I play with my kids, I pick up my kids. I don't experience that pain that I had in my mid 20s. And that's the beautiful thing, that it is possible. And I did not think that would be possible in my mid 20s. If you asked me then, I would not think that this was possible. So it is. And what I did was work through the nervous system, and I applied tools that helped me to regulate my nervous system. And it really was coming to the realization that even though I wasn't engaging in the eating disorder behaviors, I had not worked through what I had experienced and some of the mindsets that I had carried with me from that eating disorder. And it really was working through that, recognizing the stressors that were still in my life, figuring out where I can set boundaries and how to do that, and then applying tools on a daily basis to help myself get into a more relaxed state. So a parasympathetic state, which is that rest, digest, and restore. And that has been the catalyst for allowing me to be more in control of my life and allow me to live where I'm not feeling tethered down by pain. And it really is a beautiful thing, and it really is possible. And I've come a long way from where I am. And if you're listening to this, it's not an overnight journey. It's not like I made this decision, had this big epiphany, and things have been beautiful. It never is like that. I have had setbacks. I have had moments of pain when I was not as good about taking care of myself, and I wasn't as good about regulating my nervous system. But the thing is that I know what to do now, and I know how to apply these tools. And when I do have those moments where things seem to be kind of rolling backwards, I can get right back on it and help myself before it gets out of control. And that is the real blessing in all this, is that having gone through that, it's allowed me to understand how to take care of myself better. And so if you're listening to this, I hope that inspires some hope, because it is a vicious cycle between eating disorders and chronic pain, but it doesn't have to be forever. But saying that there has to be something, a change, so that that cycle does not continue. The cycle has to be broken. And there has to be, before anything can happen, a true belief in that this is possible. If you don't believe you can, if you believe that you cannot heal, you will not heal. If you believe you can heal, you will heal. And that by far is the biggest thing that needs to happen before you can heal. And beyond that, you have to believe that you deserve to heal. And that, again, is going to be the catalyst for allowing you to open up the door to figure out and apply what is going to work for you and how this nervous system regulation can work for you to allow you to live freely again. So I hope that brings some clarity to anyone who's experiencing chronic pain and an eating disorder, because it is complex. There's a lot of things going on there. But again, understanding it is, again, going to be a catalyst for moving forward. So if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me. You can leave it on, I'm on Apple Podcasts, so feel free to leave a review, questions, comments on there. You can also reach out to me through my socials at Dr. Kelly Kessler. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok there, as well as YouTube. So thank you for joining me today and taking your precious time to listen to this podcast. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. I would love to have you follow this journey and get the latest updates on new episodes.